All right. My panel are lined up like my football team. The NRL Literary Grand Final, otherwise known as the Cost of Living panel, is about to begin at Addi Road Writers Festival 2024 here in Marrickville. As stated, the panel is to some extent about the literal cost of living, rental pressures, food prices, just how hard it is to survive in the present sort of economic world, and how much that reduces us to being economic units rather than people that are part of a society and maybe part of a community. Yeah, I mean, you can hear the pain just there with that feedback. It's as if the PA knows that it's hard. So even technology is suffering, which in a weird way it is. But the whole idea of the cost of living panel was to sort of reach further into the existential nature of what that phrase, the cost of living, means to us individually and in terms of our friendships and our loves and our families, and the pressures being wrought upon us, and the weird digital lives we lead too, and both the divisions and the strange kind of mess of public and private that are present in that realm, and the restrictions that are causing, the inhibitions that's causing, and art and poetry and music are kind of not just playgrounds for creativity, but spaces for us to possibly feel a bit freer, and if not overtly free, to perhaps send out a few coded messages about how we think, who we are, what we can be, rather than accept the sort of box-like stereotypes that are imposed upon us by everything from marketing to algorithms to our own narrowing inclinations in terms of how we emblemise and create flags of what we are, when all of us are a lot more paradoxical and contradictory and strange than perhaps we would even like to think, but which we do need to recognise. And again, that's where art, literature and music and other forms come into the equation and confront us with the worst of ourselves as well as the best of ourselves, so that we can go forward as richer beings. So, on that long Fidel Castro-like speech note, I'll introduce the panel. Well, since I've got his book first, I'd like you to welcome the Walkley Award winning journalist and novelist Malcolm Knox, whose latest book is The First Friend. Malcolm, if you can somehow make your way up here. You're an agile fellow. Malcolm's book is set in Georgia and during the Stalin era. It's a dark satire of that period, and fairly obviously, because Malcolm's only just written the book and had it published, it's to some greater or lesser extent also about the times we are in today. So we'll grill Malcolm about that. My next guest is KORALY Dimitriadis, who has written The Mother Must Die, which I can highly recommend to all of you, a collection of short stories. She's also a fantastic poet. She's from a Cypriot Australian working class migrant background, and that filters into her work, along with feminist thinking about being a single mum, about sex, about the migrant culture that she's grown up in, about the religion, pretty much about everything. I forget the exact quote, so I might be misquoting you. You'll have to correct me when the panel gets going. But the changes that happened in KORALY's life and how she became an artist and developed single-handed her own publishing house to get her poetry out and restate who she had faith in to be and believed herself to be, that was struggling to sort of fight through and set free, is a real story in itself. She's a really bold writer, fantastic speaker. KORALY Dimitriadis, please step on up.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I'd like to speak about Stephen THREADGOLD, who co-wrote this book with Jessica Gerard called Class in Australia. He's a sociologist academic at the University of Newcastle. He's got a number of specialties and interests, from gambling apps through to most especially youth. And what's really interesting about Stephen is that he's not an academic just in the abstract sense. He's very strongly researched, and he runs a program in Newcastle where they interview and get feedback from hundreds of kids. So it's a very sort of fact-based, research-based sense of what's going on out there in the world. And one of the other areas that he specialises in is inequality of work opportunities and the kind of lifelong vocational warps that come out of what class you're from, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, what kind of education you've got, and all those sort of class-based things that to some extent become almost an unfashionable word, isn't it, in Australia? Class, because we're also egalitarian or we're also intersectional. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that if you're poor and you're struggling, you've still got a mountain to climb. And Stephen THREADGOLD is a brilliant academic, making sure we understand the factual nature of that from the point of view of the people who are going through it. So, Stephen. I guess maybe if I'm not sort of dumping you into immediate shocks, Stephen, since you just got to the stage, I'd just be really interested to hear from an academic and sociological point of view, if you can sketch it in a few seconds, what you think is happening to the country in terms of this sense that this feeling, which is obviously similar to the American situation, that things are very unequal and things are going wrong, and that's really affecting not just our economic opportunities, but who we are. And I guess I'm curious what your research is telling you about that for kids in Newcastle.
Yeah, sure. It's obviously a massive question, and I think it feels like that because it is. Inequality is skyrocketing. I mean, you know, there was another 1,500 billionaires produced last year. It was a real problem I think we have in our society at the moment, is that we've seemed to have moved from millions being a lot of money to billions, when millions still is. But we have this idea now that the billionaire class is the thing to aspire to, and they dominate our airwaves and our social media, and it's had a real effect on the way that we aspire to things in particular. More at my research level though, and our centre does research with young people, and that's an important distinction. We do research with them, not on them. And yeah, they're very anxious about the future. They have very realistic orientations towards the future because they know how hard things are. But unfortunately, we live in a world where they're kind of constantly blamed for the problems of the world, where they have no actual kind of, you know, they're not responsible for them, right? But they're often blamed and scapegoated for the problems of the world. So in terms of this kind of generalised feeling of anxiety that seems to persist at the moment in terms of inequality, it is across the board. It's moving up the class system. You know, I'm now a relatively senior academic in universities, but I don't feel safe. My job isn't safe. You know, everything's quite precarious. And so even now people with relatively good qualifications are feeling this precarity. So the middle class is being hollowed out, cost of living is going up and up. People that earn lots of money still can't necessarily do all the things they want to do. So that sense of precarity has become the norm, I think.
Actually, it's really interesting to hear you talk about feeling unsafe, because I most definitely feel that way as well, as a writer and, you know, a relatively public figure, and am treated as if I'm a success by younger generations, and yet there is still this sense of panic in the atmosphere because of the economic conditions, and most people I know feel it to some greater or lesser extent. And again, they actually also feel it through their kids, because I hardly know a parent anywhere who's not dealing with children that have a small or greater degree of anxiety to the point that is debilitating. And it's, you know, clearly that's a global phenomenon, not just an Australian one or a Sydney one. But there's a feeling that the economic realities that we're labouring under are invading our humanity, basically. I mean, that's really what this panel is about to some extent. I guess, you know, with that, I'd like to bring KORALY into the conversation, because you do deal with this very strongly from a female perspective, and from fighting to assert who you are, coming out of the Cypriot Australian background that you come from, and the working class experiences that you've had.
Yeah, definitely. It hasn't been easy. I think it would have been easier if I was writing about flowers and gardens, but I don't. So when I kind of came out of my marriage and I wanted to become a writer, it all kind of happened at the same time. So I was writing about liberating myself from the conservative culture that I was in, and it just wasn't to the liking of the people around me, not only immediately with my family, but also with the community itself. And that still is the case, that, you know, it's just not, they like to paint a romanticised version of the culture, probably more as a means of survival because of what they experienced when they came here. But when I was becoming a writer and becoming a single mother, I had the opposition of the family, and I was all guns blazing coming out into the literary community thinking that the art sector would be my liberator, only to realise that they also have their rules which they function by. And so then I felt very kind of attacked at all angles. And so I realised very quickly that I had to forge my own path and become kind of like a lone wolf if I was going to survive, and if I was going to write the things that I wanted to write, because I needed to write those things, because all my life I did whatever my culture and family expected of me. And I got to this place where I couldn't do anything other than tell the truth, write the things I wanted to write as a means of survival, to heal myself, but also to connect with other people who were experiencing what I was experiencing.
How does that affect something like the identity politics issue? Because so many people flag themselves through a couple of narrow boxes, and I mean, you're so strongly, I think, through your writing, manifesting your background and talking about it, and yet you're also sort of smashing it to pieces at the same time.
It's not easy, because I think in Australia we kind of follow the same systems of the States, which is, you know, you have your left and your right, and you can't really, they have their own doctrines in which they work by. And if you want to be an independent thinker and you want to think that things that don't fit in those boxes, you very quickly realise that the only way you can do that is by accepting and embracing that you are a lone wolf, and accepting that reality. And it took a long time for me to get to that reality. I spent a lot of time trying to please people and trying to fit into certain boxes, and, you know, experience a lot of blacklisting, a lot of bullying. And then I came to the realisation that, no, KORALY, if you want to do what you want to do, you've got to just be true to you and accept the lone wolf status. And whoever wants to come along, come along. And whoever wants to unfollow because of the latest thing that I said, unfollow.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to cross over to Malcolm Knox on this. As I said, his book, The First Friend, set during the era of Stalin. And it's very amusing, but there's really dark edges to it, and very strangely familiar things about it. When Malcolm and I talked on the phone, he was relieved that I didn't have an attitude of, why the hell would you set a book in the Stalinist era, rather than say to him that we're going through a kind of neo-Stalinist period at the moment, certainly for artists at least, in terms of the language they can use, the subjects that they can deal in, how outspoken they might dare to be, and a very weird sort of double life. It's beginning to be cultivated by most of the writers and artists I know, to some greater or lesser extent, where they suggest what they think rather than spell it out, where they tread more carefully because their livelihoods or their careers, they may be well off even, but their careers are at risk. And it's not necessarily that they wish to cast themselves in opposition to certain causes or political beliefs stroke faiths. It's because simply to touch those issues is a kind of explosion that has a decimating impact that is just too much trouble, too hard. And also there's a kind of depthless attitude. You only speak to causes by choosing a side, like KORALY was saying. You don't have any nuance, you don't have an ambiguous or paradoxical position, you certainly don't be confused. You're either on the team or you're most definitely off. So reading Malcolm's, your book, The First Friend, I was really struck by this disturbing sense of the sinister nature of getting used to leading a double life.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And look, I've always written about class, and it's something that I see more than an economic difference, and this corresponds with economics of class. It's more about access to the inside track, and that was certainly, you know, in the classless society that the Bolsheviks created in the Soviet Union. Stalin himself didn't own anything. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't like Putin. He wasn't out to enrich himself. The main schism between the inside and the outside was knowing how the game worked and knowing how the game could be played. And just going back to what Stephen and KORALY have said, in our world it starts, you know, it starts with the stats on kids at school getting special exemptions through the HSC and the graces and favours played by the education system that correspond very closely to, you know, private school kids are more likely to get the little inside track because they're taught to know, and their parents know, and their schools know. This goes through scholarships at university. There are umpteen percent of university students who just don't know that scholarships are available and opportunities are available, and you know that works all the way through a society, and that is one of the parallels I find between our world and the world I've written about. It's a kind of access to information with grants, with writing grants, and you know, KORALY will back me up in this. It's all about knowing what's there or not knowing what's there for you, the rules of a game to be played, and this pervaded Soviet society pretty quickly from the you know, the revolution onwards, and that's what's always fascinated me, this idea of differential access, and that means as much as anything else.
Okay, well, let me put you on the spot a little bit more, because I've seen you interviewed and you spoke about the beginnings of The First Friend, as I understood it personally, coming out of you feeling angry and helpless. I don't know if I got that wrong. I would really like to know why someone like you, a Walkley Award winning journalist, a former literary editor of the Sydney Morning Herald, half a dozen more books, your total machine writing, Malcolm, Malcolm and I know each other from way back, why you would feel angry and helpless in the present context?
Because I'm a person.
What?
Yeah, did you call me a machine a moment ago?
Writing machine.
Yeah, no, because I'm a person, and this I went down this rabbit hole around 2020, where I thought we were climbing out of this, you know, this stacked hierarchy above us of people like Trump and Putin and Xi Jinping and Modi and Morrison at that point. And during the time I was writing the book, I thought, well, to a degree, it's coming apart. And now, of course, in 2024, it's you know, re-coalescing with a vengeance. Of course you feel angry and helpless. But
it's not just recoalescing with a vengeance from above. It's as if we are surveilled by networks like our first friends. Our communities are not simply places of strength and affirmation, that because of the internet, they're places of observation and reporting and revenge.
Yeah, well, you think about information, and the promise of the internet was to democratise information and to make information more available to all of us, and we could take the opportunity to, you know, there's no difference between who gets in and who doesn't get in. The Soviet Union was similar. It didn't hide, well, its facade wasn't to hide information from people. The newspapers were full of harvest figures or manufacturing figures. They actually swamped people with information, and I think that little ray of sunlight at the beginning of the internet era, it was a really optimistic time in the late 90s because you did think that democratisation of information would mean democratisation of everything else. But we've now entered the phase where we are paralysed by information. We've lost the tools to distinguish between misinformation, disinformation, real information. And I feel as helpless as anybody around that, and so do, you know, the people you describe, the kind of, you know, journalists and people from the kind of information elite, if you like. They're all swimming in the same anchorless, wheels within wheels world as everybody, and it's not due to a lack of information. It's due to the surfeit of information being used to keep us off our balance.
Okay. Well, that actually leads me back to Stephen, because I was listening to a lecture by Stephen about the economy of attention, I believe was how you termed it, and just that attention itself is a type of product that the online information algorithms and the companies involved effectively profit from when it's reduced, compartmentalised, polarised, and making us thinner. But I should let you explain a little bit more about, because this idea of the economy of attention actually goes back a long way. It has a history in sociology and politics. So maybe you could background it and quickly step us into the internet age.
Yeah. So there's always been like an economy of attention in consumer culture. You know, billboards, for instance, are trying to get our attention and, you know, to buy stuff. Obviously, in the digital realm, it's much more intense and algorithmic and driven by data. So it's become a cliche today to kind of say that, you know, if you're online and you're not paying for something, you're the product. We're all doing constant free labour for these multi-billion-dollar companies. Every click, everything you look at, all the kind of Black Mirror-esque dystopic things you can imagine are actually happening. It's not like the sky is falling stuff. They're tracking everything we do. So yeah, definitely getting our attention is the key thing they want to do. They employ all kinds of dirty tricks to do that. You know, very similar technologies as poker machine technologies and stuff like that to try and keep you online and doom scrolling. So that's all happening. But what's interesting about it is our kind of, there's this weird thing that happens. We all know that's happening, and we don't like it. And we don't like the effects of it, but we do it anyway. It's kind of become the norm. So it's hard to be critical of something in a way, you know, I do it too. But I don't think we're fully aware of what's going on with it all. I mean, your Spotify data now is being packaged up with all the other data and sold to insurance companies, sold to rental companies in the UK in particular now. Your online data is used to rank you to see if you even get a viewing of a rental property. All this is happening behind our backs. We don't have any control over it. You can say you can opt out of all this kind of stuff, but if there's no data on you, you're actually in the most suspicious category. So it's a real issue. On the other side of the coin, though, like we have a government at the moment trying to ban social media, which is one of the most absurd things you could ever imagine. So it's easy to kind of be dystopic about this kind of stuff, but like these online spaces also are where young people find each other, find support. So there's kind of good and bad things going on, but certainly in our attention today is very much the key product of kind of what us sociologists now call platform capitalism. You know, there's a capitalism that used to make stuff and we'd buy it and that was kind of the mode of production kind of thing, today we kind of see this extra layer of things, and that's where all the kind of big bucks are, and that's the thing that's kind of driving much of the economy and taking much of our attention.
Okay, well, can I ask you a personal question as well, like I did Malcolm? And I guess given the potential for pessimism and even nihilism in the things we're analysing, why do the work you're doing with young kids? Like, you should name the actual project in Newcastle. Like, why are you doing that work, and what good can you see coming out of it, other if it's with them, not on them? How do they feel? Like, what do they get out of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're the Newcastle Youth Studies Centre. I suppose the motivation for building the centre for me came out of, I suppose, much my own life and trajectory, but also my observations of what happens to young people in the world. I mean, they get talked about a lot. They don't get to speak for themselves. One of the things in social research, you know, is the idea we have to be this kind of, like a scientist, you know, we look at the world as if it's a test tube, and we're somehow disconnected from that and objective. There's no such thing as that. All research, including scientific research, is biased. So we're very much doing research from the point of view of young people to give them a voice. And, you know, we've done a relatively good job of that, I think. And in terms of what they're saying, I actually don't think that young people have much a different orientation towards the world or opinions about things as adults. I mean, you know, a lot of the stereotypes about young people being politically disengaged, I mean, most adults are politically disengaged. What I find is that actually young people, for instance, are intensely politically engaged. They just tend to do it in a way that isn't like their parents or us or whatever, and as you get older you tend to not understand young people's lives anymore. It makes you feel anxious and you tend not to like that. So there's this generational thing that happens. It just seems universal that as we get older we start to kind of denigrate young people. You know, Aristotle was doing it centuries ago. So yeah, we're very much like want to write for young people against the moral panic positions of them. But at the same time, you know, they're very anxious about the future, just like the rest of us are. But it does seem in terms of the material foundations of things that they are getting harder and harder for young people to have a secure life. The examples that Malcolm was using, for instance, about education, the research we've done, for instance, of first-in-family kids into universities, it's kind of seen as if once you reach university, it's kind of a panacea for all your problems, you're going to do fine. But universities don't alleviate class problems, they make them. And so young people get into a class system from a disadvantaged background and have really often negative experiences because there's all this unsaid knowledge that you need to have to do well at university. It's not just about turning up and studying. Increasingly it's about networks, increasingly it's about getting an internship. Our university is now making students do 140 hours of free labour in terms of what they call work integrated learning. So if you're a poor kid that has to work 40 hours a week, you can't do that and you fail. So there's all these kind of inbuilt inequalities into this system that is meant to be the system that alleviates the inequality. Young people know this. They're born into a world they're told is meritocracy, but they very much experience that that's bullshit. And this creates the precarity that they experience, I think.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Coralie, listening to Malcolm and Stephen, and I'm thinking about this from sharing the point of view of you as a poet as well as a short story writer. It just seems that the activism, if you want to use that word, that you have as a creative being is the only sort of tool that you have at your disposal to sort of fight back against these kind of pressures and maybe offer something positive for other people too. I guess I'm just wondering how you feel about listening to Malcolm and Stephen talk, and if you're pessimistic or why you're optimistic at all.
Hearing them makes me sad. I'm not going to lie. I studied accounting computing and I went into computer programming because, in my culture, I wasn't allowed to kind of study art. It's like, forget it. It wasn't even an option. So I don't think I would have been able to, I think I would have struggled even more and not being able to maybe achieve what I wanted to achieve if I didn't have that IT background and a little bit of a financial backbone behind me when I got divorced. You know, the government just makes it so difficult for single mothers, especially like, you know, if you're getting the parenting payment, straight away, if you move in with a guy, you know, his income is counted, it's counted and you lose some of your payment, right? What if this guy isn't even someone serious, but already the government is financially tying us to this person, you know? Similarly, child support ends at the age of 18. Why? You know, I mean, the cost of living is so high right now. Why does a billionaire father who is providing financial support to a mother that is on the poverty line get away with supporting their child when they go to university? You know? I think for me, the way that I have survived is by accepting the realities of my world. And that took a long time for me to come to. I fought against systems. I tried to make things, to fight against these systems. Then I realised, you know what, I can't win against these systems. You know, things like funding, for example. You know, I have to learn to play the game of funding, try my luck. And if I don't win, I don't win. It's like going to the casino, you know. And realising that, you know, there have been points where I've had to go, okay, can I make some money outside of the arts, outside of opinion writing, to sustain myself? And I have worked outside of the arts and created financial opportunities for me outside the arts, so I don't rely on the arts for my living. Therefore, I can say what I want to say. And I try and focus on that mentality, because at the end of the day, if you put all your eggs in the arts basket, you can't say what you want to say. That's a reality that I've come to. You just can't.
Kind of ironic, really. Well, I think I may have at least one too many eggs in that basket. But, you know, I mean, most artists tend not to be wealthy, although many of the successful artists that I know usually have some sort of platform of wealth to assist them, to give them the independence they need. I mean, your story is a really interesting one. I mean, I don't think I mentioned before, but this is the first literary festival KORALY's ever been invited to.
In Australia.
In Australia. Yeah, right. After 3 books of poetry and a collection of short stories, I don't know, that seems a little scandalous to me. And I think, and I'm sure you already know this, it's because the nature of your work and who you are is a little full on and it doesn't fit the mould.
Yeah, I think I learnt very quickly that my first poetry book, Love and F Poems, I won't say the full word, wouldn't be published in Australia. So I turned it into a zine and it started selling really well in a bookshop on Fitzroy Street, on Brunswick Street in Fitzroy in Melbourne. And it became like one of their best-selling zines. And someone said to me, turn it into a book. And I said, there's no way anyone's going to publish this. So I started my own publishing press and I turned it into a book. And I literally went around to bookshops and said, this book is a best-selling book at this bookshop. Can you stock it? And they would stock it and it would sell. And then I built and built and built and built. And then someone said, get a distributor. And I was like, no one's going to distribute this. And I went to every distributor in Australia and they all said no, except for one, Woodslane, that said, we don't do poetry, but you look interesting, we'll give you a go, you know. And I soon realised, and they've been distributing me for 10 years, and my poetry is best-selling in Australia, and I'm proud of that because I did it all on my own. And even with my second poetry book and my third poetry book, and that's why there's so much space between my poetry books. It was 2012, Love and F Poems, and then 2018, Just Give Me the Pills, and then 2024, She's Not Normal. And the reason why there's so much distance between these books is not because they weren't finished, it's because I was trying to get a publisher, trying and getting rejected. And some of these rejections, I mean, they were, God, I want to publish them one day. They're so interesting. But, you know, because it's like even after I'd sold thousands of poetry books, it still wasn't enough. you know? And then I decided when I published She's Not Normal, that's it. I am not going to shop around my poetry anymore. I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to self-publish it with my press, and that's it. Because I'm sick of wasting my time trying to convince people about my work when they're clearly not interested, you know? And it was when I developed that mentality that Puncher and Watman said, can we publish your short story collection? Which, by the way, has been finished for 10 years, as has my novel been finished for 10 years. And I was like, yeah, sure, come on board, you know? And they didn't censor me at all, which was really great, because I was worried that they might censor me because my short story collection is very controversial. And I worked with Puncher and Watman because I felt like they wouldn't censor me, and they knew who I was, they knew what I was doing, and they wanted to get on board.
Thanks, Coralie. And congratulations too for doing it. That's a hard road. Well, the censoring question brings me back to Malcolm and the first friend. I mean, I doubt it, but it did make me wonder if your publishers were nervous about the content of the book at all, because the book does actually function in a double life way. There's the outward story, and then there's the suggestive story, the things that it does satirise, and the allusions to what language is acceptable, or what ways of being can give you success. Or which was probably one of the darkest part of the book for me. There is a daughter in the main family of the book who the parents have to watch out for, because she may inform upon them, because she believes in Father Joseph Stalin. And that really frightening, grotesque of generational division, to the point that your home life is so invaded, and in the mediated lives we live, a loose social media comment could have deeply destructive stuff. So suddenly there's this feeling that I don't believe this entirely, but it feels like a dark road we could end a la the Cultural Revolution, that our own children are divided from us, and that was pretty bloody scary, Malcolm.
Yeah, well, they did try to break down the family unit as a loyalty unit and replace it with loyalty to the party. Stalin is Papa, and loyalty to him comes first. The hero for children for decades in the Soviet Union was a boy called Pavlik Morozov. And Pavlik grew up in a village, and his parents were wealthier peasants, what were called kulaks. And Pavlik was a hero because he dobbed his parents in to the authorities for hoarding. And in revenge, the other peasants in the town killed Pavlik. And then the party came in and killed the people who had killed Pavlik. Every child learnt about him, and obviously the message was to put the greater good above family loyalties. The main character in the book responds to this by going on what was called an interior migration, and his withdrawal from danger was, not to drink the Kool-Aid, but to go through the motions of drinking the Kool-Aid while migrating to a free space inside. But in practice, this means even in a marriage, and he has a very independent-minded wife, they can't have kitchen table conversations because there might be something in the telephone that's listening to them. There might be something implanted in the cornices in the ceiling that is listening to them. So they need to speak in codes as well. And the chief driving drama in the book is the wife Babylina thinking that her husband Murtov has a plan for their survival, and as you know, they're in extreme peril all the time. But he can't tell her what the plan is. He has to allude to it, and she can't ask him what the plan is. So everything in domestic life becomes encoded and relies more and more on trust between humans. And we're obviously not in an extreme world like that, where slip-ups in intimate relationships can mean somebody knocking at the door and dragging you away in the middle of the night. But
Yet.
yeah, well, I do see a kind of when you look at the turnout numbers in the US the week before last, you see a third of the population on a kind of internal migration to live their lives and to pretend to themselves that all of that shit isn't going on and can't touch them. And so the society and social connection becomes more and more atomised because people don't trust anything but themselves and their inner migration. And it produces anxiety at a personally, it produces anxiety and distrust between people. It breaks down social cohesion, organisation. There's there's data linking your tendency to join a group or join any kind of thing from a running group to a poetry group to a club of any kind. There are links between that and your belief in democracy. And they're pretty obvious, but we now have the data that shows that. And I suppose I wanted to show a world where we have now the perspective to look back on it and see, well, that's where it started. That's where it goes to. Only history can kind of pull us out of the confusion of this moment we're living in, and that was why I chose another time and another place.
Okay, well now I can really put Stephen on the spot, because we were just chatting before and you were talking about the process of teaching and lecturing with your students and the decision to no longer use contemporary news events because the reaction from students was immediate, if I'm understanding it right, immediate polarisation with no possibility of dialogue or developing a critical understanding. Maybe I'm simplifying, so cut me off and say what it tells.
Yeah, look, it's a kind of pedagogical reason as much as a political one. If you're teaching about class or gender or race or power or whatever, if you ask a question about something going on in the news at the moment, it tends to provoke more emotional responses than like well thought through ones, more opinions rather than analysis, I suppose. So yeah, that's one of the reasons that in classes these days, a lot of us will kind of use more kind of, generalised examples to get discussion going, whether it's like, inequalities in the workplace or whatever, rather than specific things about gender that's going on in the world. And like, I suppose in a kind of critical reaction to your question though, like, I don't think we need to oppose like identity concerns that young people have as being some kind of negative. I think people of, I'm going to say our generation, like Gen Xers or whatever, tend to see the absence of class in public discourse as a problem, and I write about this and I think it's a real problem. And juxtapose that to young people's concern about things like gender and race and sexuality. I think that distinction in and of itself is part of the problem. By trying to kind of say that the absence of class is therefore a problem and we're not kind of talking about it, it's just another level of separating all those kind of forms of identity that keeps us all separate. So one of the things we try and do in sociology, we talk about making the normal look strange, to question everyday beliefs and common sense. And so we try and use more general things that young people are familiar with and challenge those perceptions rather than kind of using everyday stuff, I suppose, to do that. And it then also frees them up to talk freely about it without themselves thinking that they have to self-censor around those kind of things. But it's no doubt that the very problem of that censorship that we're trying to get around is an issue in terms of teaching. But for the most part, I think older people's negative orientations towards so-called identity politics as, again, just a more of a generational shift in how young people do their politics, just like our parents probably didn't like our politics. My suggestion is that older people just need to get out of the way.
I really love that phrase, making the normal look strange, which to some extent is the inherent nature of art and poetry and music. Strangeness in all its variations, from the beautiful to the ugly to the weird, and the sort of flight that strangeness offers a reader or a listener or a watcher, to go to other places and to grow their understandings of other people and themselves. For sure, I'm guilty of what you're talking about.
I am too.
The old guy whinging about, they don't understand class, no doubt.
Can I just butt in something about old people getting out of the way? Here I go. When it comes to literary grants, I've never applied for a grant because, I think I've got other ways of making income. I was born into advantage. I don't think a person like me should be asking for help. I think it should be going to somebody like KORALY, who wasn't born with the same advantages as I was, but I can't bequeath that opening to somebody. I don't have the structural power to do that. The space I open up will probably be given to another middle-class white guy. So I'm not doing anything in terms of structural change. It's a bit like driving an EV and patting yourself on the back and thinking, well, I've done my bit for climate change. The question for communicators, which we all are, is how to, I guess, do something more than just get out of the way. It's to help other people to get into that space and to make the most of our vacating the space, so that something better comes and takes it from us.
Well, I mean, in response to that, I'd say that our role as sort of artists and journalists and public intellectuals, whatever terminology you want to use, is a kind of a form of protest against being thinned out, and having the nature of our true selves and thinking and heart and how it's expressed through our work so commodified that it's completely shrunken, and it's I don't know if it's not necessarily a lie, but it's just so thin that you begin to wonder if it's worth it. I mean, I don't really come up with a negative answer. I keep doing what I keep doing. I know we all do, but you're aware of the fight and the pressure and this. I mean, when I hear the economy of attention phrase, it makes me think about what art and poetry and music do for us. And that is that sort of sense of how much it makes us plunge very deeply into ourselves or leap way over ourselves to other worlds and other places, so that we are not simply operating in a sort of 30-second window or a doom-scrolling space. And as Steve and I were conversing before this panel, that's a sort of undesirable product-oriented situation for the algorithms and the internet sort of digital companies. That's not really a very sort of profitable situation. And it may not be a dark conspiracy. I mean, the algorithms they're not interested in that because they're interested in a very reduced view of who we are. Perhaps, because I know we're running out of time, I could just get KORALY to speak again to this thing and maybe cite specific parts of your book, The Mother Must Die, particularly the first story and The Mother Must Die itself, because they were funny and confronting at the same time, and they just didn't go places that I expected them to go, right? And it seems like everybody's looking, or not everybody, but a lot of people are looking for affirmative cultural experiences in their news, in their humour, and in other forms of art. And I'm not really interested in those kind of affirmations. I think the more we get shaken up, the better we are for it.
Yeah, I agree, and I definitely don't think we should move out of the way. I think this new generation needs role models. They need role models, people that are independent thinkers, that are not buying into the polarisation. Because I look at my daughter, I mean, she's almost going to turn 18, and the other day I gave her an opinion about something that I'd put out there, and she said, "Mum, you're not a feminist," because I said what the opinion. And I was like, how could she say this to me? And I know why she said it to me. It's not her fault. It's because this younger generation is so buying into this polarisation. You have to be either committing to this side or that side, or you're out on your own. And we need people, our generation, we need to be independent thinkers, and that's why with my art, I don't censor myself at all. I will not compromise myself with my poetry, with my short stories, with my opinion articles, with anything. I just won't do it, because what is at stake? Like, if we continue down this path of polarisation, where are we going to end up? And I don't think that is the answer, you know? So that's why I do the work that I do, because I feel very inside my heart that we need more independent thought. We need dialogue. We need people to be able to speak about their experiences in an honest way, not in the way that we're supposed to speak about them, you know, but the way that we feel about them, because that's what connects us as humans, our stories.
Well, within that, there's such a thing as the freedom to be wrong as well as right.
Absolutely.
And for that to be a larger, not to then demand that people agree with your wrong point of view, but the nature of exploration.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I want to say as well, because I always say when I give my opinion, hey, I might not be right. Hey, I might change my mind. And I have changed my mind. And if I do change my mind, I say I've changed my mind, because that's the whole point. If we can't have a conversation, we can't have debate, how are we supposed to move forward if we're supposed to know all the answers right now? You know?
I usually start with, I don't know, but, da-da-da-da-da, and by the end, people are like, actually, I think we do know what you think, Mark. I might end it there. I'm not sure if people have any questions for us. I can, we've got one, we've got two at the back here. Wow, okay. I'm going to jump off the stage and we're going to wreck your sounding thing, Ted. Okay, here I go, agile as ever. I'll go to the very back and come back. Yeah.
So my question is to this gentleman. To Malcolm, do you think that, have you pondered if maybe subconsciously you chose to write about Stalin, given that you're a Walkley Award winner, what would have happened if they went, nah, that's not a topic that we'd like to sort out? Then you look at the other lady and realise her struggles. Or it's just something that you passionately wanted to write about, and that's how...
Yeah, look, I didn't choose it. I was down the rabbit hole for quite a while before I started to ask why I was there and why I couldn't get out. So all of my kind of rationalisations for it are after the event. But I'll give you a slightly different way of answering your question, and it sort of feeds off what Coralie just said. I reckon, so I write for the Herald, Sydney Morning Herald every week. I'm pretty sure I'm one of the least read regular columnists. And that's because when you read me, you don't necessarily know what I think, what team I'm on with an issue. I'm doing all sorts of kind of odd things and putting on masks and playing games. That's far less read than the person who's on their soapbox shouting at you. Because you can then shout back at them. And you know, media, the way it's set up, particularly post-digital, is there to foster division, and division gets numbers, unfortunately, for all of, you know, we sensible people here. The people who are most read and attract most attention are the people who want to shout at you. And so the form of kind of censorship and quietening you're talking about, the way that works is as a discouragement of the person who wants to be more nuanced and maybe more playful and just trying to make you think in a different way, as opposed to just getting you to shout back at me. And that's sort of real life censorship, disincentive, more than somebody just clamping down on you.
Okay. Just, well, hang on. There's a question here from...
Yeah. This is a question for KORALY. Does making art about your culture change the culture?
I like to think so, because I have a lot of women contacting me in the background, telling me that my work, finding my work has changed their life or has helped them, that has helped them to confront issues maybe with their family, things that maybe they were afraid to talk about before or push up against. So, I've gotten a lot of encouragement from, a section of my community, whereas the other more conservative section of my community, I would say, hasn't been, as supporting as what I would like them to be. So, yeah, but that's why I keep doing it, I guess, because I do get those people contacting me and telling me how important my work is to them, and so that's nice.
Okay, we've got one last question here, I think.
Directed primarily at you, KORALY, but actually could be answered by all three of you. In the beginning, you said that my take on it was that you didn't tick any boxes in the art world, so you were sort of getting backlash from your cultural background and also this new field that you're in. And I'm just curious, because there's that stigmatization if you're in the arts world. For me anyway, there's a level of acceptance and of expression. What was, and what do the others, have they witnessed, and what did you personally witness for you to have felt that way?
I noticed very quickly that if I didn't say the right things, people kind of, attacked me. So, and I noticed very quickly that people were saying I didn't write poetry the right way. Like, someone had written a review about Love and F poems saying it sounded like a schoolgirl's diary and it wasn't poetry. But hey, if it's going to draw more people into exploring the world of poetry, then it's a good thing. So, yeah, I thought it would be my liberator. That's how I thought what I thought the art sector would be like, because all my life I wanted to be an artist and I wasn't really permitted to do that. So, yeah, it was a shock to realise that it was a sector just like the corporate world and had its own set of rules and doctrines. And I tried to fight against those doctrines for a long time, and then I realised you're not going to get anywhere, KORALY, just do your own thing. And so when I came to that acceptance within myself, that was the liberation for me, accepting that I could do it on my own without the approval of anyone.
Okay, we might have to end it on that note, as I think we're running over time. But so that's the cost of living ACCA, the liberation game. So thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, KORALY. I really appreciate you being a part of it. It was a bit of a wild... To be quite, had no idea what we were going to really talk about. We had a rough idea. Had a general broad theme. Let's see how we go. Let's fly wild, guys. Thanks. Thank you.